Dear Diary, you know what nobody talks about? How exhausting it is to always be the strong one. The one who's so good at handling things, the one who's so self-aware, the one people forget to check on because they assume you're already checking on yourself. But behind the poised energy and the steady voice, there's a version of me that's quietly begging, can someone just ask if I'm okay and really mean it this time? Because strength without support becomes isolation, and emotional maturity without reciprocity becomes a slow, invisible kind of grief. I didn't become resilient because I wanted to be. I became resilient because I had to be. Because softness wasn't safe. Because if I fell apart, everything around me would have crumbled too. And now I'm realizing that my strength was never supposed to cost me this much. In today's episode, I want to unpack the loneliness hidden inside high-functioning people. The way resilience gets mistaken for not needing love, not needing softness, not needing really anything at all. I want to explore where that strength comes from and how we can start turning it back into something that works for us instead of becoming a prison that keeps people out. Because no matter how together someone looks, you never know the weight they've been carrying just to seem okay. So if you ever felt unseen in your strength, this one's for you. XOXO, LJ. So I really wanted to talk about this subject because I feel like there are so many people out there in the world right now who are very resilient, very good at bouncing back, but that ability to be resilient came at a cost. And the cost is typically trauma or negative experiences where you felt like you had to be the support for yourself. So in turn, you've learned how to be the support for everyone else while failing to get reciprocated feelings, failing to get that reciprocity that you deserve. And instead of asking for the reciprocity, you learn how to dim your light or make yourself small in order to appease another person or in order to feel like you fit into the room that you're in and make you feel like you should belong better if you were to conform. But I want us to talk about that because I think it's super important that we get out of that mindset that if somebody looks like they're perfectly okay on the outside, that means that they're perfectly fine every day on the inside. I think we should start normalizing asking our friends how they're actually feeling and what they're actually up to so that we can provide better support for each other as well as better support to everyone else outside of ourselves. Sometimes I also feel as though this is especially harmful when it comes to dating because people who come across as stable, secure, not really toxic, a walking green flag essentially, they start to be feared by a majority of people because those people are used to their baseline being chaos. So you put all the people who are secure on a pedestal and minimize yourself, which teaches you to believe and you're not worthy and that you don't deserve to be loved fully and purely and unconditionally. And so because of that, we have many people who are here in our society sabotaging their own happiness because they would rather risk going back into that chaotic baseline than to risk getting something new and ending up in a negative situation again. But the irony is that trying to foresee a negative outcome is actually just projection, especially when you have no baseline to actually correctly compare to your realistic and reality in the moment situation. And when we use these jaded frameworks to try and understand the world we live in now, we only notice the gaps and the cracks and the negative things within the story, and we fail to miss the beautiful aspects of where we are. Many of us forget to remind ourselves of how far we've come because we're so focused on comparing ourselves to others, especially people we may know, people in our age group, people in our profession. But the thing is that all of us are dealt completely different hands, and comparing yourself to others is only harmful in the grand scheme of things because the person you're competing against is the child version of you, not the version of you that exists right now, not the version of you that compares itself to everyone else, but the version of you that was childlike, who you were before all the trauma, before all the noise told you where you're supposed to be. And if the childlike version of you is proud of where you are right now, then you should be proud of yourself too. Because sometimes enjoying the journey itself is actually how you get closer to the view you're hoping for. So instead of focusing so hard on the future outcome, the future things that you want, start focusing inward on the now, on the present, and continue to ask yourself questions periodically throughout the day that keeps you in alignment with who you are trying to become. One of my favorite questions I ask myself when I feel stuck in a day, especially on days where I'm less productive, I like to sit there and ask myself, what can I do right now in order to get closer to my higher self? And sometimes it's a very small thing, like create a to-do list, make a mindfulness journal about, some personal reflections, because those are all aspects of who I wish to become. Those are habits that I want to incorporate into my life. So why should I wait until the bank account matches when I can control these little aspects right now and create the life that I want right now? Because guess what? The only difference between who you are right now and who you wish to become is typically a bank account. So in actuality, nothing about you truly changes except for your ability to see yourself as your highest self. And I don't like having this situation be true, because what ends up happening is we have a whole society of people who feel as though they have to suppress who they are and wear these masks when they go out into society, because we've made people feel as though they have to conform into the rest of the world in order to feel some kind of resemblance to support, or in order to feel like they can meet people and make friends. It causes people to hide and shield and suppress their true emotions, not just from each other, but also from themselves, because they've normalized suppression. And that's a very dangerous thing. That's why we see so much anxiety, so much depression. And many people are like, well, why have the numbers gone up? I think that mental health was always something people tried to suppress, but I think right now we have more visibility in the world than we ever have before. So now it's becoming exacerbated by the expectations, and let me say unrealistic expectations that are put on us by society through social media, when in reality, many of the things we see online are only but fraction of the real truth that's happening. As somebody who's a content creator themselves, I may not be the biggest one, but I have worked alongside many of the biggest influencers in the world. And one thing I can say confidently is that it is not what it's cracked up to be behind the scenes like it is on screen. And a lot of influencers aren't even making as much money as they say they are, because followers doesn't always equate to dollar signs. It's what the person does with the follower count that dictates how much money they make. And a lot of people just don't know how to make their following monetizable. So in actuality, they're just selling you a version of what you wish you had in order to gain more following. So what you're following is a fantasy, not reality. And that's the danger of social media, because now it's a highlight reel. It's not about being yourself. It's about posting your best self so that others are jealous and live vicariously through your life. And while that can be great sometimes, it's very dangerous when that's all we have online. That's why I aim to normalize vulnerability on an online platform, so that maybe others can feel invited in to do the same thing, whether that's incorporating vulnerability in their personal brands, being more themselves online, or for individuals who aren't content creators, and maybe this will make you feel safer to be yourself, because in the grand scheme of things, we don't need any more trends. We need more unique people who are willing to not fit in, because those are the ones who end up on stages, not in the crowds. And I would say that one common factor too about people who are hyper resilient is that they learned how to be this way because maybe in their childhood they were under supported in certain ways, so they had to become the support system for themselves. And this can happen to individuals who are still inside of or grew up inside of that ideal version of what a childhood looks like. For example, they could have both parents, they could have the traditional life. There's not really a whole lot of fighting. But if the needs of that child are not being met, regardless of what those needs are, they still grow up to provide the needs to themselves, which creates hyper individualism as well as hyper resilience. And that can be a great life skill when it comes to career, when it comes to battling challenges in life and building your mental health and growing in those ways, but it cuts you short in your relationships, especially if you're too afraid to communicate your needs within romantic partnerships, which is a very common thing for people who are resilient. Many people who are resilient become people pleasers because they, again, know how to provide support to others, so they may bend over backwards or contort themselves in order to make the other person feel comfortable. And again, this isn't because they have any kind of manipulation tactics. This isn't for manipulation. It's not for negativity. It's actually in the attempt to be a positive force and influence on other people's lives due to a higher level of empathy. Because when you've learned how to suppress your emotions and be like the foundation for many others, you also create so much empathy for those who are unable to do that for themselves, which makes you feel as though you are responsible for other people's emotions when in reality, you're not. You're only responsible for yourself. And if you have something to say that makes other people upset, that will just tell you exactly which people you should be around and which ones you shouldn't, because you shouldn't be surrounded by people that you have to conform to fit in with. You should be surrounding yourself with people who allow you to be yourself, accept you as you are, and are even excited about having you in their space as you are. And this always leads to a quiet loneliness within these individuals with high resilience, because they don't feel like they have an outlet to truly express their emotions, and they're afraid that if they do express their emotions, they could come across as weak, unstable, or, not really capable of being a foundation for others, which is typically what they pride themselves in being. And so they suppress their true feelings, emotions, and thoughts in the attempt to avoid rocking the boat, making issues. The intention behind that is actually positive. It's just that it comes at a cost to themselves. It comes to the detriment of who they are. Now they are suppressing their true identity in order to make other people feel good, which is literally people pleasing. I think a lot of people do this without really knowing that they're doing this. And I think people pleasing is a concept that we've now normalized within our society, especially in America. America is kind of a place that is foundationed on fake, on things that are not real, prioritizing the wrong things. Like, we don't prioritize family here. We prioritize finances and career over that, which to me is like really toxic mindset. We should definitely agree with the Europeans and be more family oriented. I think our entire country would be happier that way. But as you guys already know, I don't think they want us to be happy. They benefit more when we're not. And so here we are, all battling each other, faking ourselves, trying to fit in, pretending like we're people that we're not so that we don't have to risk vulnerability. And, I'm done with that. I like being myself all the time. And if not everybody can handle that, that's too dang bad. Because guess what? At least I'm me all the time. The people who love me for me. My followers, they follow me for me. I'm not playing a character. This is who I am all the time. What you guys see on camera is what you get in real life. And I'm so happy that's the case, because I go around the places, I go to events, and I hang out with massive influencers, massive celebrities, and they are nothing like the versions you see online. And guess what? They are so unhappy. They feel like they're masking. They have to play a role. They have to pretend like who they are online is who they truly are, when in reality it's not. And it eats them up inside, even though they'll never say that, because ego and pride doesn't want to make someone feel like they wasted years of their life on something that made them unhappy. So instead of acknowledging that fact and growing and healing and becoming even better, and then turning the platform into something that resonates with them and their audience, because now they have a platform, they continue to perpetuate their own isolated cycle by withholding that persona that's not real. And as humans start to grow and evolve, we change. Our personalities change, our interests change as we grow older. And when you keep your brand the same all throughout your life because you have a character to play, it starts to take a toll on people. And this is a reason why there are so many Hollywood stars who are doing drugs, who overdose, who get into all these troubles. Yeah, that's why. They want to break from their reality. That's why they do drugs. They want to be able to stay up late and hang out with each other as much as possible, because they don't want to be alone. Because when they're alone, they have to think about their life, and they have to think about their existence, and they have to ask themselves existential questions, because guess what? That's what the brain naturally does when it's alone. So many people try to avoid that by hanging all the time with their friends, by taking substances to help erase, the possibility of them sitting in contemplation, watching TV, falling asleep to TV, doom scrolling, falling asleep to doom scrolling. These are all attempts to avoid your existential questions that your mind needs to be asking itself in contemplation. And contemplative states typically happen most at night or early mornings when our body is more, shut down still but lucid. And when your first input or your last output is something, just really meaningless, you're trying to avoid what's really within you. You're avoiding how you truly feel. You're avoiding the fact that you are unhappy ultimately in the life that you are in. And instead of admitting it, you're just continuing this unhappy life without changing anything and hoping that one day things will change when it can. You're a hamster on a hamster wheel with a VR set. So you think you're running a marathon, but in reality, you're just spinning in a hamster wheel. And that's why people call it the rat race. It's like a looping thing. But this is like the mental version of the rat race. Okay, you're running a marathon that simply doesn't exist. And that is the scary part. Because once you cross the finish line, you take the headset off and you'll see that your whole life you've been running in place. And this leads me straight into one of my biggest annoyances, because this happens to me all the time, especially in dating. I have a secure attachment. And one of the main reasons I know that for sure is that I have the ability to handle rupture and repair, which is the number one foundational telltale sign of whether or not a person is secure and whether or not a relationship will succeed long term. And rupture and repair is pretty much when you have the ability to get into an argument or a disagreement, and instead of, escalating the situation to something negative, you're able to calm down and de-escalate and simply communicate your emotions without being loud or aggressive of any way. So because that's not normal for most people, expressing your emotions, extreme emotions, in a gentle way is now being misinterpreted as either too extreme or not real. Because most of the time, people expect anger, for example, to be expressed in a very volatile, outward showing way. So if you tell someone, let's say I'm sitting like this and I'm just talking, because this is what I do when I'm upset. I'm just like, hey, like that actually made me really angry, or hey, like that made me really sad. Like I say it just like how I'm saying it now, but because my affect is more flat or it's more peaceful or it's calm, people project onto me whatever their experiences have been or their insecurities are. Some people will think that this quietness is scary and that there's another other shoe that's going to drop somehow, and I'm just gonna like magically be an escalating kind of person, which could never actually happen, which is why it's simply a projection. Or they don't take my feelings seriously and they don't make any changes because my feelings don't come out in a volatile way, so they don't take them seriously. If I say, hey, I'm really, really sad right now, they're not going to take me as seriously as if somebody's like, oh my God, I'm so sad right now. But the funny thing about it is that both of us could be equally sad when you hook us up to, like a monitor and it shows you where their head is at. Like, let's say the same exact parts of our brain light up, but the way of expressing it is different. So it's like, why are we justifying one person's hurt while ignoring the other? Because this person's more expressive? But at the same time, hurt is hurt, so we should be treating everyone with equal importance. But we don't do that because when we see people are resilient or we see that they can communicate their emotions without exploding, we assume that they have everything together and that they don't need support themselves because it doesn't come across as instability. But you don't need to be unstable to get help. You don't need to be sick to be cared for. And you don't need a whole bunch of things in order to be loved, okay? Just be yourself, be who you are, and find the real support that nurtures who you are already instead of chasing worlds that you just don't fit in. One of the biggest things that I think is so important for people to also avoid doing is making themselves responsible for other people's regulation. Especially to people who are still in contact with their parents and they have like a dysfunctional history with them, but still in connection. You can control what you can control. So as long as you are showing up as yourself, you're showing up honest, you're showing up in ways that you can feel proud of. If the other person is offended, if the other person is upset, if the other person is falling apart because of what you said, that is not your responsibility. Of course, that doesn't give you the right to go say mean things. It'd be bad. This is mostly in situations where people avoid saying how they feel because they're afraid of how the other person will feel. It's like, no. You're not responsible for their feelings in that way. You're responsible for yourself. So who do you wish to be? Do you wish to be the person who's honest all the time or the person who lies? Because as much as people want to act like their intentions matter, you aren't your intentions. You are your actions. So if your intention is to do good in the world, but you're constantly doing bad things and you're being mean to people on a daily basis, your reality is telling you, hey, I'm a bad, mean person. Because no matter how much our intentions say what we want to be, it's how we show up that really counts, or how we don't show up that really counts, because reality is what actually exists. Everything outside of that is a projection. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen next week. You don't know what's going to happen in a month. And I'm sure you have plans, but there's no 100% certainty that it will come. And that's why people need to start focusing and zeroing in on the now, on the present, and being present in the moment. Because once you open your eyes and once you can truly see, and that's why I'm saying this show is called The Awakening, once you can see the world through a present lens, it changes your perception of life. You no longer worry as much. You no longer have as much anxieties because you're not focused on outcomes. You're focused on what you can do right now. And the better your experiences, the more you try for the world in a positive way, the higher your chances are for high quality things happening down the line. But if you focus so heavily on what you want, you're so focused on that you're, having all these fear responses that are holding you back from creating the life you want, because in the now you're based off of fear. But that's not how your higher self would be thinking. So you got to stop thinking for yourself right now and start thinking for the higher version of you. What would my higher self do in this moment? What would my higher self feel in this moment? What decision would my higher self make in this moment? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself. And sometimes they're uncomfortable because your ideal self won't be the way you're acting right now. That's like 99% of the chance there that when you ask yourself these questions, your immediate response isn't going to be what your higher self would actually do. And that's why you got to ask yourself these questions. When I wake up at 5:30 a.m. and I first started doing that, it was hard. But at the same time, I reminded myself, I said, Lindsay, you said that this is the schedule that you wanted. This is the schedule that you said you needed. And this is the schedule that successful billionaire you would be doing. So we can't wait until the money comes to be who you want to be. We need to do that now. Because guess what? I may not have a mansion, but I have a bed. I have an alarm. I can wake up every day. Those are things I can do right now. So why am I waiting for a bank account to wake up early? Why am I waiting for a bank account to read the books that'll bring me wealth? Why am I waiting for a bank account to care about how I look in the rooms I sit in? Why am I waiting to live my life when I could do that right now? Because I bet you anything, when you ask yourself what your higher self would do in these moments, it will actually shock you at how much of a difference your life really makes when you do things more intentionally and you go about things more intentionally. So that's why I feel like it's important we recognize that it's great to be resilient. It truly is. But it's not worth it if it means suppressing who you are in order to fit in. You don't want to fit in. You want to stand out, especially if you're an entertainer, a content creator. We don't need more trends. We need more uniquely awesome individuals who are ready to put their stuff out into the world. So don't listen to the noise, listen to your heart and follow that. Dear Diary, the truth is, most people never notice what doesn't scream. They don't hear the quiet grief behind the I'm fine. They don't see the fatigue hidden inside the over-functioning. They don't realize that the person who makes space for everyone else rarely gets asked what they need in return. But here's what I've learned. Being resilient isn't your identity. it was your survival. And just because you learn to do everything alone doesn't mean you should have to. It's okay to want softer support. It's okay to unlearn your hyper independence. It's okay to say, I'm strong and I still need love. You don't have to keep shrinking your needs to keep the room comfortable. You don't have to keep hiding your loneliness in exchange for praise. Your strength is admirable, but your softness is divine. And you deserve a life where you're allowed to be all of it, not just the version of you that keeps everyone else afloat. So here's your reminder. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to earn softness, and you don't have to earn support. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is let someone love you back. XOXO, LJ. And that's a wrap.